Hello, 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 good evening, and welcome to another episode of Great Leadership Live. Karibuni, as we say here in Kenya. And welcome to episode 21 of our Great Leadership Live show. Thank you for making time to spend an evening and an hour with us. In line with the Mental Health Awareness Month, which is the month of October, this will be our last show with topics related to mental health. And tonight we have guests who are here to talk to us about dementia. You may have noticed our poster had a Y. That was intentional, and it's great that many of you caught that, not as a spelling mistake, but also as an intentional typo. So in our virtual studio tonight, we have Karimi Njagi, we have Elizabeth Mutunga, we have Dr. Jos Hooker, and our host, the man himself, Waweru Njoroge, and behind on controls, we have Elijah Mumbo. For those watching us live on YouTube or Facebook, you can ask questions or make your comments, and we'll bring them up on screen. And you can use your Twitter or Facebook live chat windows for that function. You can follow us on Facebook or Twitter at Great Leadership Live, the 8 being number 8, or email us at greatleadershiplive@gmail.com. So, Waweru and habari yako. And he has frozen. Ice Age. Waweru. Something's wrong with the internet. So let me take Waweru's role and start with the ladies first.
Zuri, hi Martin, how are you doing? Good to see you. And glad to see our guests. Yeah, I know. I can't seem to. Can you hear me though?
We can hear you. Hello.
Yeah, can you hear me? Sorry. You seem to have broken up as well. But I hope everybody can hear me.
Yes.
Okay. Liz is nodding, and Dr. Hooker is nodding. Martin, I'll just leave you out of this one for the moment.
I can hear you.
Yeah. No, I'd like to say. Oh, you can. Okay, cool. I'd like to say thank you very much to our guests. As Martin said, this is Mental Health Awareness Month, October, and this is the last episode. We've tackled a few things: men and mental health, women and mental health. This is about dementia. It's been a very interesting month, actually. I've learned a lot. It's a lot of sad truths that we've tried to digest, and we've imparted on our viewers as well. And as always, I'd like to start by asking our guests to introduce themselves. We're missing one, so let's ask the two over there. I'm going to start as usual, ladies first. So Liz, if you can introduce yourself, who you are, what you do, and a bit of background, then I'll ask Dr. Hooker to do the same.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Elizabeth Mutunga. I'm the CEO and founder of Alzheimer's and Dementia Organization Kenya. I'm a counseling psychologist and a HR practitioner by profession. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was short, sweet, and to the point. Dr. Ari.
Thank you. So thank you very much for having me with you here. I'm Jos Hooker. I'm a neurologist. So a neurologist is a doctor who is trained and specialized in looking after people with disorders of the brain, spinal cord, nerves, and muscles. And we are very interested in different disorders of the entire nervous system. And I practice at the Aga Khan University Hospital, Nairobi. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ari. Let me actually start the conversation then with you, Dr. Ari, from the neurological point of view. They basically give dementia as an umbrella term to describe a range of progressive neurological disorders. It's like telling somebody you have cancer, but you don't know what kind of cancer you have or what kind of dementia you have, right? So what are the different forms of dementia, and which is the one that is the most prevalent?
Okay, so first of all, what is dementia? So dementia is really a loss of learned skills. So we learn things as we grow. We learn from childhood, from when we are babies. We learn to feed. We learn to talk. We learn to walk, and we learn to think. We learn abstract thinking. We learn to make decisions. We learn from our mistakes, and we learn to remember. And all that learning is the skills that we acquire. In dementia, we progressively lose those skills. And the reason is, for the most part, we are progressively losing brain cells and connections between brain cells. And really, so dementia is the acquired loss of intellectual, cognitive skills that we've acquired over growth, and this happens progressively due, as I say, to loss of brain cells and connections between brain cells. So dementia, like you said, is a big umbrella term. As we grow older, we are more likely to get demented. And the commonest cause of dementia is Alzheimer's disease. Alzheimer's disease causes, say, about 50-60% or even more of people living with dementia. But there are other causes of dementia, like vascular dementia, where one gets a stroke or strokes causing dementia. There's a particular type of dementia called dementia at Lewy bodies. In each one gets dementia, but also gets more motor problems with walking, slowness, Parkinsonism as such, and frontotemporal dementia, in which more of the front parts of the brain are affected. So one's decision-making ability, language function, and sometimes also memory can be affected badly. So like I said, there are different types of dementia, but the commonest cause of dementia is Alzheimer's disease. In many cases, these are not exclusive. One person can have different pathologies coexisting and causing dementia. So a person with high blood pressure, diabetes, has Alzheimer's disease, and has had a stroke, has vascular dementia. I mean, it can have two coexisting pathologies.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Hooker. I hope that's shed some light for a lot of people, because, like I said, dementia tends to be just a blanket term. As you heard Dr. Hooker say, the most prevalent one is Alzheimer's, which I think a lot of people obviously are familiar with. Liz, I'd like to jump to you and ask the question: what the symptoms? Dr. You touched on the aspect of what the brain cells and how that causes dementia, but I wanted to find out, what are the symptoms of dementia?
Okay, so one of the most common symptoms is repetition. People repeating statements. For example, when you walk in and say hello to them, they'll say hello to you, and then you walk away, you come back, they still say hello again. Another thing is lack of motivation. Things that they would do for themselves, they no longer want to do, like even showering, brushing their teeth. They are struggling with these kind of things. A lot of times, most of them talk about going home. And when they're talking about going home, it's not the home that we know. It is the home where they grew up. So a lot of family members get very frustrated and say, why is he talking about going home? And yet they're at home. So the home they're talking about is the home where they grew up. And usually this, you'll notice at around 3 o'clock when it's sundowning, and they're now talking about going home. Something else, they have issues with spatial relationships. So they don't know whether you're their child, whether you're their spouse, whoever you are to them. So those are some of the major ones that you'll see. And of course, money also is a very big issue. A lot of people will tell you their loved ones keep going to the bank to withdraw money, then forget where they have put the money. So those are some of the symptoms that you would see with people living with dementia.
Thank you so much, Liz. Dr. let's get back to you. I wanted to ask a question. Is it true that while dementia affects, or does it only mainly affect older people? And actually, it's not a part of normal aging. So is it true that while dementia mainly affects older people, it's not normal part of aging?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. I mean, we all lose some things as we grow older, but there's a kind of a natural loss of function that we accept and we expect. But dementia is beyond that, so it's beyond the normal, and really for a long time we've kind of accepted that our elderly will, this is just aging and it's not a problem. And part of the reason is how our families have been built. I mean, we've had large extended families, we've been living together, we've been supporting the functions that get lost. But now we've moved to nuclear families. We've moved to, those supportive tasks are no longer there. And so it becomes very obvious that there is a dysfunction here, there's a problem here. somebody can't walk as well, is having problems washing themselves in the in the bathroom. So clear changes take place, and those are abnormal. So yes, it is different from normal aging. We are all expected to lose some things, but we lose beyond that. So in a way, one could think of dementia as a kind of accelerated aging, faster than what one would have expected.
Is it genetically related?
Sorry, I didn't
Is it
get
genetically
that.
related?
Very good. Yeah.
Is it genetically related?
Yes. So there is a proportion of patients with dementia who have a genetic cause. And so, for example, amongst people with Alzheimer's disease, 5 to 10%, in some studies up to 15% of patients would have a genetic cause of their dementia. Now, in these people who have a genetic cause of dementia, they tend to be younger. So most people who get dementia are over the age of 65, in their 70s, 80s, 90s, but the genetic forms of dementia tend to occur earlier in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. So if you see somebody in their 40s or 50s, or even early 60s getting a profound dementia, then that's probably genetic. Yeah. But in addition to that, there is also a genetic loading of risk. So even amongst the people who don't have a one gene cause of dementia, they have a higher risk of getting dementia because they have certain genes that are more prevalent, and some of that is work in progress actually. And certainly for the African continent, we don't know the genetic risk factors. We are still on a steep learning curve about what our genetic risk factors will turn out to be.
Yeah.
Thanks, Doctor. You mentioned the figure of age of about 70 to which we start seeing this prevalence.
Yeah.
So Martin, be careful. I know you. And I'm saying, Martin, be careful. You're approaching 70, aren't you?
Not yet.
Okay.
Forever young.
Sorry, Martin, you're breaking up. Okay.
I don't know. My net is good.
Okay, Liz, I wanted to ask you the questions. How do you actually then treat dementia? Okay, then it's
I don't
my end.
think
But
there's
if
even
Liz,
a
if you can hear me,
treatment.
yeah.
Okay. I was going to say this actually should have gone to Dr. Hooker, but anyway, I'll do my level best and then he'll help where I do not get it all right. But what happens usually, at the moment, there's no cure for dementia. But of course, the doctor, before he finally tells you what type of dementia you have, they need to do a lot of tests. And of course, they'll do cognitive related tests, there'll be blood work. There'll be also an MRI test done so that they actually can tell you what type of dementia it is. So at the moment, there is no, if it is at the early stages of dementia, then they can give you medication to slow down the progression of the condition, but it does not mean it will cure the condition because at the moment, there's no cure for dementia. Dr. Hooker, I hope I have done justice to the question.
No, very, very good. Yeah. No, that's true. And so in terms of treatment, I mean, like she said, we don't have a cure, but we have things that we can do to help people. And for example, for Alzheimer's disease, there are medicines that can help the brain cells that are remaining talk to each other better by increasing a chemical that acts as a messenger between the cells. And in addition to that, there are various behavioral treatments, and Elizabeth is very good at helping people with that. And there are several people who do a tremendous amount of work in supporting families go through this journey. But the one thing that we know is, having a routine for people. An important thing is exercise. I mean, there is a great deal of evidence now for exercise as a means of preventing dementia, and also in terms of possibly slowing it down. And I must say that in the cohorts of patients we have, certainly the ones who are physically active, exercising, running, walking, they tend to do very well compared to the ones who are more sedentary. And that is there's a common experience, and there is some emerging evidence now that exercise can actually help slow down the curve of progression, or the slope of progression rather. And so I think there are many things that one can do to help, but like Elizabeth said, there isn't a cure. Not yet.
I want to add, before you go to the next question, Oweru, there is a lot of traffic from the viewers, which is very interesting. And I can see some questions are being answered as they're coming in. And for those who are watching us, we'll try and address as many of your questions as possible. The ones I'm seeing are being, if you don't see your question pop up, that means it's been addressed or they're currently talking about it. But carry on, send us your questions. This is the moment we have to try and get as much as possible from the experts in front of us. So carry on, sorry.
I'm going to pick up a bit later on in terms of prevalence of Alzheimer's. Let me finish with Liz with regards to the question I wanted to ask her. Actually, Dr. Hooker, I want to come back to you because there's something else I'm actually looking at, and I think you might have touched on it. But the aspect of what about, if you surround the person who has dementia with things like photos, or you wear certain clothing, or you wear certain aftershave, are there triggers like music, films, and aspects like that that will actually then not necessarily treat it, but manage it, I suppose?
Yeah, so that's very true. I mean, if we look at somebody who has a spinal cord injury and gets an injury in the mid of the back, and they've lost function in their legs, they can no longer walk, they're in a wheelchair. They have lost something big. They've lost their legs, but they still have their arms and everything about the neck, which is working. So in people living with dementia, there is a lot that is going, but there's a lot that's left. And true, as time goes, more and more gets lost. But it's amazing how much there is at every time point, even towards the end. People recognize some memories exist. I have a neighbor, for example, who is a retired lawyer, and he has dementia, and his daughters managed to help him recognize them by just putting badges on themselves, so with names, and that triggers. He's able to read those names, even though he's profoundly demented now. And so there are things that are there that we can access. And I'll give you an example of a patient of mine who till her last visit to my office, with a beautiful, caring family, till her last visit to my office, she could still sing and dance, and yet she could not remember. She could not even remember her own children. So one tries to tap into those memories and those experiences that are still encoded and that are still there, and give meaning to them, and use them as a hook, as an anchor to try and access the person that you always knew. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Liz, let's move from the mind to the heart. I wanted to ask you, what are some of the guidelines to stay resilient while caring for someone who has dementia? So how do you then deal with your stress and your emotions and not take it out on them?
Okay, I think before I answer that, I just wanted also to just add one point that from what Dr. Hooker was talking about music.
Please.
Like he said about the lady who, until the very end, my dad also towards the very end remembered music. And because, of course, their first language has gone, and they only remember the language, their second language, or the language, the one that we call mother tongue. That's what they could remember. And so he had gone through a series of strokes, and so he was not speaking much, but he used music. We used music to just get to him. And towards the end, and that was like 2 weeks before he passed on, we played one of the Kamba songs that was his favorite. My dad was on a wheelchair for a very long time, but on this time when he listened to it, he just moved up and he started moving his fingers. He couldn't speak, but you could see he's recognizing the music. And as the song progressed towards the end, then he slumped back to his wheelchair. So music is a very great one of the greatest tools that we can use for people living with dementia. Now, to come back to your question about how to take care of ourselves as caregivers rather. Caregiving is really hard. And a lot of times, and most caregivers will tell you, because when you live with people with dementia, a lot of people stop visiting. It's a very lonely journey. You're on your own most of the time. And so you have to really take care of yourself, because it's very easy. And we've seen cases where caregivers actually pass on before the person they're caring for. So we tell the caregivers it is important to do self-care, because if you do not, you will go through burnout. And with that, you'll start maybe shouting at your loved one, not because you want to, but it's because you're tired. And you cannot give what you do not have. You cannot give good care if you also do not take care of yourself. So it's very important that you actually do self-care. Take care of yourself, even if you have to ask for help. Because a lot of times caregivers do not ask for help. You do not say, hey, I need somebody to come in and sit in just for an hour for me to go out and breathe. Let's start doing that so that you do not break down. If you break down, then you cannot give good care.
And I think I may interject and say that, you know, I mean, there's room for what she's talking about. I mean, respite care. I mean, so you know, families spend, you know, the entire year looking after the loved ones, but those people who are doing the care need some help. Sometimes they just need some time off, you know, some time off to recharge. And I think we all need to be willing to chip in and provide respite care. And there are actually some professional organizations that can help with that. And I think that's one of the things that Elizabeth has helped expand that space of professional care that is available now.
Okay, I'd like to there's some questions that have come in from our viewers. Eva Mina is asking, and I'll throw this to any of you can pick this one up, but Eva Mina is asking, how does one know if regular memory loss is dementia related or standard degeneration as we age?
Okay. Doc, I'll start and then you can plug in. There are many times, and that is a question that we get all the time. There are times when you're going to, for example, you're from the sitting room, you're going to the kitchen. You stand at the kitchen, you stand in the kitchen and you're wondering, what did I come for? Then you go back to the sitting room, and then after a few minutes, you remember, oh, I was going for a glass. At least you're able to retrace your steps. But now, if you're not able to retrace your steps, then there's a problem, because that means that there's the onset of dementia has begun. So if you're able to retrace your steps, or forget for example, even your keys somewhere. There are many times, have you ever looked for your keys and you're still holding them? That many times people start asking, am I getting dementia? No, at least you have them with you. But if you cannot be able to retrace your steps back, or if somebody asked you, what did you do today? Or did you have a conversation with somebody? And they say, no, we did not have that conversation. Then there is a problem. But things that you can be able to retrace your steps back, you can remember a conversation that you had, then you're at a good space. Actually, I think you can add on to that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I mean, the other common thing is people say, okay, I forget names. I forget who this person is. Well, that's very common actually. So one of the world's experts on dementia is a gentleman called Vladimir Hachinsky. He is Canadian. And I once met him and he told me this story, which I always relate to people, that, you know, you know, the Roman emperor always used to have somebody standing behind him. And this gentleman's main function was to whisper in his ear who was the next visitor coming to meet him. And today's presidents and prime ministers and kings and queens always have a briefing before they meet somebody. So that person used to be called the nomenclatura. So his job was to just you know, tell the person the names of the people who they're going to meet. And obviously, the emperor would look very clever, greeting everybody by name, but he's been briefed. So forgetting names is a very common thing, and that in itself does not make names of people. I mean, But if you start forgetting names of, other familiar objects, then obviously that becomes an issue. So I think it's what goes beyond the ordinary that really is dementia. And the beyond the ordinary can be different for different people. So, for example, a professor of botany who knows, the biological names of many plants, forgetting those names may be bad enough to be early dementia. And for an ordinary person, forgetting what a spoon is called, or what whether this is a watch or a pen, that may be dementia. So it really depends on what your baseline, what your baseline is, what your before you became unwell, what was your level of functioning. I think we are frozen, is it? Or... Yeah.
We seem to have lost everybody.
Yeah.
Okay, Dr. Sorry, we can hear
you. You can hear me? Yep. Okay. So I think that's that would be my answer to the question of what is serious, and memory loss that interferes with one's functioning. So for example, you wake up in the morning, have breakfast, and then you're asking for breakfast again. That clearly there's something wrong, or if you're asked, what did you have for breakfast, and you don't remember what you had for breakfast, that is a danger signal, so to speak. So I think, like I said, what goes beyond the ordinary, that would suggest that there is a problem. Yeah.
Okay, everybody back online now. Am I the only one who disappeared?
Yeah. So I think
we're back online. I don't know.
Yeah, I think this is a degenerative network, is it?
It seems to be getting very smart. I like that. I wanted to find out then if everybody can hear me better now. Dennis Davies asked a question. Liz, I'm going to throw this to you. What are the protocols with dealing with a stranger with dementia? How do you identify it? How do you respond and help? And you give an example where you saw this happen to somebody in a banking hall and malls.
I think one of the things that one should do is just walk over to the person with a smile. A smile will always, even if they're feeling anxious, they will feel that you're out there to help them. And also with COVID, it's actually more scary because we're all wearing masks. We're not shaking hands. And a lot of these people are so used to this kind of things. But I think just walking over to them and just being calm and asking, can I help you? Do you need any assistance? I think if they see you're genuine, and a lot of people look at your nonverbals. Our nonverbals speak a lot, and people with dementia always will look at your face to see, are you genuine? Do you actually care? So I think it's just walking up to them, smiling at them and tell them, I'm here to support you. Do you need help? Do you need to maybe be taken somewhere? If they see you're actually very willing to support them, they will warm up to you because they can pick it from your face. So that is how I would answer it, and I will back it up with, my dad, every time he would go for a walk initially, when he was walking alone, would have this gentleman following him because he was very paranoid that this people, anybody can harm him. And as he walked, every time when he got to where he was crossing the road, this gentleman would smile and tell him, can I help you cross the road? And my dad would keep telling him, oh, you're a very nice man. Thank you very much. And this young man did that for 3 weeks. And my dad started warming up to him. And within a very short time, he ended up being his caregiver. So the little things that we can do, just smiling at them, assuring them, and reassuring them again that you're there to support them, I think that will work wonders for them.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks for sharing that, Liz. Then there's a question from Nisreen Bana. Dr. I think you touched on this, but the question is, are there any precautions on prevention of dementia? You said, is there any precautions on prevention of dementia? I suppose the other way to ask would be, in what ways can you actually reduce your risk of dementia?
Okay, so I think the biggest risk factors for dementia are vascular risk factors. So, high blood pressure, diabetes, smoking, alcohol, certainly in excess, overweight, cholesterol issues, and besides these vascular risk factors, lack of exercise in midlife. So our exercise kind of regime as we go through midlife predicts our dementia risk. So the less the exercise, the higher the risk of dementia. Our education status. So the better educated one is, the better the stronger the connections between nerve cells, and the less likely that one is going to dement. But part of the reason is because even if a process of dementia is occurring, it will be less visible to some extent. That may be part of the explanation for this. But it's well known that a high education level is protective against dementia, and there is evidence to back up a kind of Mediterranean type diet with lots of fresh fruits and vegetables, fish, and a low amount of salt and red meat. So those are some of the things that are known to be protective, and some of the measures that one can take to prevent dementia. So if one does have high blood pressure, optimal treatment of high blood pressure. If one does have diabetes, optimal management of the diabetes, preventing strokes, preventing heart problems. All these are important aspects of dementia prevention.
Okay, there's a couple of streams. I'll ask you to hold that thought. There's a question from Washika Mungai, which I need to actually ask as well. And there's also a question from Ume Gulam. I'll come back to those two. I wanted to ask this question. Dr. Ari has just talked about how we can look at preventive measures in terms of dementia. I want to now take it the other way and say, listen, I've been diagnosed with dementia, right? Now what do I do? How do I go about living my life to the best of my abilities?
Okay, that's a very good question, because a lot of times, a lot of people don't know what to do with their loved ones once they've been diagnosed with dementia. So one of the things that we encourage is have a schedule. Dr. Ari had talked about they work very well with a schedule. So we ask family members, come up with a schedule. For example, they wake up at 7 o'clock in the morning. Then they either have shower or they have breakfast. Then after that, what do they do? Because activities are very important for them for cognitive stimulation. So they could have them playing chess, for example, if they're still at that point where they can still do it. They can do crosswords. They can color, for example. Coloring is also very good for them. Then after that, what do they do? Maybe they have lunch and then have another activity. If they liked gardening, for example, go with them and do some gardening with them. So keep them activated and busy, because once they know in their mind, because they do not have a watch and they do not remember even what a watch is, but with that schedule, every day they know, when I wake up, this is what is going to happen. Then after that, this is going to happen. They like order. They do not want you to wake up in the morning and you're changing everything for them. They get very disoriented, they'll get agitated, they'll actually get very violent sometimes because they do not know what next. And it happens even as when you have planned your day and somebody comes and disrupts your day, you're not at a very good space because you're trying to readjust yourself, and it is the same with them. So have a schedule. make it very compact in a way, but also have room for changes. Like I said, at 3 o'clock, maybe when they are so agitated and they say they want to go home, you could plan that time to bring in the walks and then go with them, walk with them around, talk about the flowers, talk about the trees, and that will calm them. So having a schedule is very important because that plans their life for them. And for you too, as a caregiver, it is much easier for you.
Okay, Karibu. Unmute your microphone.
Sorry?
Yeah, that's it. I was asking you to unmute your microphone.
Thank
you so much.
Sorry.
That's fine. Thank you so much for gracing us with your presence.
Thank you.
No, I can be cheeky with her like that because I know you. How are you doing? It's good to have you here.
Thank you.
And I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself very quickly, then I'm going to go and shoot a question straight to you.
Okay.
So tell us who you are, basic background, you're involved in this conversation, and then I'm going to ask you a question immediately after that.
Okay, I'm Karim Njagi. I am an actor in the TV series Kina. I am also a TV and film producer and a businesswoman. I do fruit and vegetable deliveries, and I am a caregiver to a parent who's living with Alzheimer's.
And then to my question then. I was just waiting for you to come in so I can ask this question. So the question is, how do the dynamics of relationships with individuals who are cognitively impaired and no longer as they used to be change? In other words, how do you love someone when you hate their dementia? Unmute.
Okay. It's not a really easy place to be at because there's this person that you really, really love. But the dementia or Alzheimer's starts changing them. And it's very easy to actually hate the person because one of the things is that they can be really hurtful. But you then get to learn that it is not the person that's making them behave like this, rather it's the illness. So when you get to that point where you empathize with someone, the love is still there.
Okay, is there anything else you want to expound on that? Yeah, go ahead, Dr.
Pardon?
Okay, yeah, I think that's very well put. Actually, I mean,
I was asking you.
I would say that one way to think about it is think about childhood. I mean, we when we are children, we behave in very odd ways. We do strange things. We need nappies. We sometimes need to be carried from one place to another. And that is all done out of love, even though the tasks involved are not exactly the most glamorous. And in a way, one can think about this old age and its ravages, including dementia, as a kind of a second childhood. And indeed, in some of our cultures and our scriptures, this is kind of part of the. I mean, it's even stated. I mean, for example, in the Quran, there is a verse that talks about how people who are given long lives are reversed in creation. So literally, and I'm sure there's similar kind of similar quotations from different religious traditions and cultural traditions. And that reversal in creation really refers more or less to a second childhood, and really looking after or helping look after somebody with dementia is often very much like looking after a second childhood. And I think that's another way to look at it. So the love permeates really everything we are doing, and it's all for love.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ari. Thanks, Kirby. Thanks for joining us as well. Liz, I want to come to you with the question that Ume Gulam asked. He says, hello, he or she, They ask, hello, is it okay for a dementia patient to change places, or will it more confusion?
So I know this is directed at Elizabeth, but I think she's
Liz,
frozen
yes.
out again.
And Liz has just dropped.
Yes. Can I just answer on her behalf? While
yeah, please go ahead.
So people living with dementia don't take kindly to change of their usual environment. So, for example, even if they are admitted to hospital, they get very, very upset and confused, and they're very unhappy. And so generally, as a general rule, a change of environment for people living in dementia is not a good idea. Now, obviously, there are times when, of necessity, it has to happen. For example, if there are a number of children who are involved in the care, sometimes one needs help and they need to move on to the other, to another child's house. But it does create some problems, except if the person is familiar with those movements. So there are some families that take turns looking after their loved ones, and they're familiar with that routine kind of, and that can be fine. But otherwise, it can be quite traumatic.
Okay, Karimi, you wanted to add on to something? You need to unmute.
Yes, about changing the environment of someone who's living with Alzheimer's and dementia. One of the things I realized is that when my parents actually moved back up country from Nairobi, then my dad's condition actually deteriorated because he's in an unfamiliar place. Yes, it is home, but he lived in Nairobi practically all his life. So now he's in this new place with people who he's not been around for a long time. And then also the routine that he was used to in Nairobi has suddenly changed. So yes, that does contribute to the deterioration of patients.
And then I want to ask you, Karimi, can you take me through a day when you're now with your dad as a caregiver? How does your routine work, or what do you actually do in the process?
Well, he wakes up usually, say, at about 10 o'clock. Then he'll have his breakfast. And one of the things he really enjoys doing is listening to music. What is actually interesting enough is as the parts of the brain die out, the musical part of the brain is never affected. So he listens to his music. We take him shopping. Whenever we're going shopping, we'll go with him. If someone is doing a run to town, we try and go with him because that is something he actually enjoys. He actually enjoys interacting with people. So for instance, if it's the bank, someone's going to the bank and you go along with him, he'll want to talk to the manager, to the guard, to the tellers. So what we've done is that we've actually sensitized them on how to deal with him. So they'll have a conversation. It may not make sense to them because of the memories that he's losing, but they'll have a conversation. And then we'll go back home. And also part of the routine is also the diet. So we also look a lot into that.
Okay, thanks. Liz, I want to ask this question about caregivers. Where do some caregivers actually get it wrong? Is it a lack of resources, or where can they go to actually get more information so that they know how to deal with the situation? And I suppose that also then doubles up with another question that Dennis had asked about removing the stigma that's attached to people who have, or people who are living with dementia.
Okay, it's true. A lot of people, because of the condition of dementia, because one, it's very stigmatized, so a lot of people do not talk about it. So people keep to themselves. So you do not know even there are other people out there who are going through the same journey with you. And so it's not ignorance, it's lack of information. So once they come in, for example, a support group meeting, and then they meet other people who are taking care of their loved ones, then they learn from them and they are able to understand that I am not alone in this journey. Another thing that we use to support our caregivers, we have support groups where we bring in experts. These experts will help you understand. For example, we'll bring in neurologists who will explain to you what dementia is and the type of dementia. And we'll bring in a psychiatrist, explain why sometimes they do not sleep, they're very agitated. So how do you need to deal with them? We'll bring in lawyers so that you start putting your affairs in order, because money and everything, and if you have to bring in people to run the estate. So all these things, it's not because they do not, it's not ignorance, it's because they do not have the knowledge. So we support them in our support group by bringing that information closer to them. And one thing I've realized, once they realize they are not alone, it gives them the, like it's like they're recharged and they're able to continue caring for their loved ones.
Okay, thanks, Liz. Dr. Ari, I want to come and ask you an ethical question. Well, the second bit is ethical. The first one I want to ask is, it might sound a bit morbid, but is it prudent to what they call take action now, as in complete the essentials documents such as living wills and etc.? And then I'm going to jump to the question about country Holland, where it's euthanasia is legalized. So the first question is, take action now. What should I do in terms of how quickly should I do the take action? And the other question is about whether it's advocated for, whether we can actually do it either in this country or whether you would probably prescribe to it, where you actually have somebody with assisted dying. Yeah, somebody to allow somebody to die with dignity who has Alzheimer's dementia.
Okay, yeah, I think those are both really, really important issues. So starting with the first question, I think all of us, whether we have an illness or not, need to have a plan in place for a time when we will not be there. And we all have 100% mortality. We are all going to die. It's just that we don't know when. So I think we need to be clear about that, and we need to put in place some kind of plan. I would say that it's often possible to convince people living with dementia that that kind of plan needs to be put into place, especially if it's early in their illness. Later on, it becomes a bit more challenging because they lose what we call testamentary capacity, meaning the ability to actually make their wishes known, and legally they can no longer then make a will or set their affairs in order. Before that happens, it's very, very important for families, for patients and their families to act on these matters. And so I always talk about patients and families. And actually, Elizabeth has even had sessions where she's called in lawyers during their monthly meetings to discuss these aspects of things with families. So I think it's very, very important. And you can see the problems that Kenyans get into. I mean, how many court cases can you count today, just flipping through the newspapers, where there are inheritance battles, and many of these people died of neurodegenerative disorders, including dementias. And so it's really, really important, I think, to do that. So, get one's bank accounts, in joint names so that it's easier to handle, protect the person, get all the properties sorted out, either whether it's in joint names or in some kind of trust, get legal advice in all this, and get good quality professional legal advice, get a will sorted out, get where a person lacks testamentary capacity, then one often has to go to court to get guardianship of an estate. And so these are important steps a family needs to take, because otherwise people take advantage of people living with dementia and of their families, and families come to harm, and some have gone from really very good financial situations to really living in poverty because of the kind of harm that they've come to. As far as the issue of euthanasia is concerned, as you know, euthanasia is illegal in Kenya. In most medical people would consider it unethical. There is this whole issue of dignity in dying, but dignity in dying does not necessarily mean that one has to hasten or assist death, so to speak. If we wind back 100 years or 50 years, or even in our current situation, if we go to the villages, how do we die? We die at home. We die with medical intervention, and we die with our loving family around us. We need to go back to learning how to handle death and how we all want to die. And certainly I, for one, and I'm sure many of us would agree, we don't want to die desolate, alone in hospital. We need to be able to find ways to live our last days and die in peace at home. And there are services, including hospice services, that can help to in this regard. And now with many hospitals, there are now palliative care departments. So certainly at the Aga Khan, we have 2 palliative care consultants. Many of the hospitals, including the Kenyatta National Hospital, have a palliative care services available. They're mostly being used by cancer patients, but there's a whole room for neurological palliative care, and we certainly use our palliative care services. So I think that is where I think we need to come together and make families, help walk families through these, and prepare them in advance for these eventualities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Karimi, I want to ask the question. Actually, I want to add on to that aspect of taking action, but also want to ask you this question: what are the key things to avoid when it comes to dealing with a person who has dementia?
Okay, so on just what Dr. has spoken about, the other things, it's called like advanced planning. We need to start having the difficult conversations, like about the will, power of attorney. And now we're getting to that point where people are going into homes for care. It's about time we started having that conversation, like when the diagnosis is done and it's in the early stages, would this person be willing to go into assisted living? Yeah. And we are seeing facilities slowly coming up for that sort of thing. And actually, that is one of the ways to reduce the stigma. Now, on the key things to avoid when it comes to dealing with a person with dementia or living with Alzheimer's, one, don't ask them if they remember who you are, because chances are that they don't. And you will be frustrating them by trying to make them to remember something. In fact, asking them questions is really, really hard. Another thing that you need to be careful about is the memories. For instance, the other day, well, not too long ago, my dad says that he wanted to go see his mom. And at the time, I really didn't have this knowledge. So I told him that, oh, but I'm sorry, your mom died 7 years ago. And now that really shook him, because he went through the pain of losing his mother again. So in such a situation, what you would do is talk to him. Honestly, I ought to have continued talking to him about, about his mother. And then another thing is, you need to avoid putting the blame on them. You need to understand that this is an illness, that it is the illness that makes them behave in certain ways. And you need to stop taking out anger and frustration on the person who's living with dementia. And then there's this other thing of there's a stage that comes where the person will will wander off. They're not really wandering off. It's just that they're so used to doing certain things, and keeping them cooped up actually starts getting to them. So they'll try and leave, they'll try and go. And unfortunately, one of the things that happens is people will ask you, why don't you try restrain them? And the thing is, if you try and do that, then they'll go into a crisis and they'll get extremely agitated. So if someone wants to is trying to leave, take them on a walk with them. Yeah. And this is also part of where the routine, exercise should be incorporated. There are things like going for walks. That's very important for them to also get out of the environment that they're in at that particular point in time. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Karimi. Liz,
can I add one?
And I
can
think
I add
this
one
ties
thing?
into what Karimi was talking about. Yeah, sure, Dr.
Yeah. Can I just say that, I really appreciate the existence of the care homes and the institutions that are coming up. And I think they have a place and they are very useful. But I would urge us to rethink this whole care home issue. So we're down this slippery slope that the Western world has already walked, and we have large kind of numbers of institutionalized elderly people, and you can see what happened with the COVID pandemic. Lots and lots of people died in those institutions. I really firmly believe home is best, and anybody handling this situation needs to read a book called Being Mortal by Atul Gawande, who is a U.S. kind of Harvard faculty and a surgeon with a public health interest. And I think it would open our eyes to the fact that we have a chance in Africa to actually have a better model of care than institutionalized care, where care is delivered at home with good quality carers, professionally trained carers, so that people can live the last years of their lives in dignity in their homes, and die in their homes. And I think that would be, I suspect, a much better quality of care than institutional care. And I'm not saying that there's no place for institutions. There is, but in terms of respite, and there are situations where there are no families. I mean, there's some elderly people without families. They would certainly be supported by such institutions. But thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Liz, I'm going to come back to you. It sort of ties into what Karimi was talking about. But the question is, why is it important to show empathy and not sympathy?
With empathy, you're able to empower them. You are working with them with what they still have. Sympathy, you are taking away their power. So if they are not able to brush their teeth, you take the toothbrush quickly and brush for them their teeth. But now you've disabled them. So empathy is empowering them, working with what they still have. If they are still struggling to walk, hold their hand and still walk with them and tell them, I'm here for you. I am going to do this with you. I'm going to walk with you. I'm going to work with you. But sympathy, you're doing stuff for them. And so you are making them not able to do a lot of things, and they just sit and wait for you to come and sort them out, which does not help. So empathy is what we need to give them, empowering them, showing them that they're still capable of doing a lot that they think they can, and that also makes them do better, even physically, emotionally, even spiritually. It makes them do much better.
Thanks, Liz. There's a comment from Ladina Ndenya, who says, I think it's high time the government should look into centers for persons with dementia / Alzheimer's. Let's have some homes where if one is not able to take care of their loved ones at home, then there can be a facility that can handle all these with professionals employed to help in caregiving. Thank you so much, Ladina. Sorry if I got your name wrong. Karimi, I want to come back to you and ask this question. Is it true that people with dementia can't understand what's going on around them?
I'd like to say that they understand, but the problem is they'll not be able to communicate. So you'll find situations where there's someone living with Alzheimer's or dementia, and maybe the family is just talking ill of them, but they can actually hear, they can understand. But it is now speaking up because maybe the part of the brain that controls speech has already gone. But I'd like to believe that they understand exactly what is going on. Thank you.
That's correct. Dr.
Also,
Tariq,
could I just
the
add?
question is to you now. Sorry, please go ahead, Liz.
No, I was just going to say, I concur with Karemi. And one of the things that we tell caregivers, please do not discuss them in their presence. They may look like they're not understanding, but they're hearing everything. And one of the things that goes away last is their hearing. So we have to be very careful what we say in their presence, because like I said, it could either make them or break them. There are family members who will tell you, even if I go visit my loved one, they're always having their eyes closed. And that is because sometimes maybe they've had comments that you have made. So we really need to be very careful what we say in their presence. If you need to discuss them, move away and have the discussion, not where they are. Thank you.
But I'd like to ask, and this is something that I suppose is another, I don't know whether it's a myth or not, but I was going to ask the question, why is it important to always include the person with dementia in any discussions and decisions that are being made about them?
Well, because it's about them. Yeah. So, and the thing is,
I suppose they're saying, you see what Liz
still,
was saying, don't say it in front of them.
Well, what is the
I'm just
discussion
trying
that
to
you're having? You see, if it's a decision that has to be made, it's about them. So include them in the conversations, right? And the thing is, like, but they're still family at the end of the day. Yeah. So it's what we're saying is, some really negative things that don't say them in front of the person. Yeah. But if it's a decision you're making that concerns this person, include them. And they will feel included. It is part of the empathy as opposed to sympathy. Thank you.
Oh, cool. Now, Dr. Hooker, I was going to come to you, and then I got sidetracked by the ladies. There's a word I came across which I didn't quite understand. Well, I do understand it, but I'd like to viewers to actually understand what it means. And the question is, how do you understand or help us to understand what unintentional disenablement is, and how do you look out for it?
Yeah, so thank you. I'm not entirely sure what it means but I must say, my feeling is that what we're talking about is kind of similar to what we've already discussed, in the sense that, for example, if one is breaking a diagnosis of dementia to a person with relatively early dementia, I think it would be wrong to kind of talk over them and talk to the relative or the carer or the caregiver and say that, look, Mr. X has dementia and this is Alzheimer's disease. I think it's important to include the person in that conversation. And so by unintentionally sometimes we disempower them, we disenable them by talking over them. Not including them in the conversation, in the discussion, and in the decision making, which affects their lives. So, for example, if you want to discuss, certainly with a person with early dementia, whether they would, if they became very unwell, whether they would want to go to ICU or whether they would want to be on a ventilator, and I think those are things that we should discuss with them. But now it's a completely different story where somebody has advanced dementia. It's very difficult to include them in a conversation. They just can't participate in the conversation. And indeed, like Elizabeth said, many times the people with in that situation, it's often better to have a meeting with a family separate from them. So my understanding of this term is when, without maliciously doing it, we kind of override them. We almost like pretend that they are not there in the room with us. And I think that that is tragic, and it's unhelpful, and it gives the wrong signal to them, and then it creates resistance to very useful strategies for their care.
Thank you, Dr. I was thinking that also that if you tend to treat them with sympathy and you start overdoing things for them, I've been trying to spoon feed them, and spoon feed them everything and try and think for them, I suppose that would then detract from any kind of meaningful life they're trying to live.
Yes, correct. And it's the same toothbrush example that Elizabeth gave. So, for example, somebody who has difficulty walking, for example, you dump them in a wheelchair and carry them all over the place, and they want to walk. Let them walk. Even if it's support, there's a risk they might fall, but you can prevent falls by various strategies, including carer with them, assistive aids if necessary, making changes in the home environment, removing carpets that could trip them. Let them be able to walk. If they I'll give you another example. There's a neurologist who has dementia, and he's until very recently been writing papers in neurology journals. He's actually written one a couple of years back. So he could do that up to that stage. At some point, obviously, he'll not be able to do that, but it would be important to do that, even if it needs a bit of editing and help and all that, that's fine. But whatever function they are able to perform, let them continue to be able to perform. If there's they might want to tell stories, let them tell their stories. The one maybe want to recite a poem which they remember. They've probably forgotten your name, but they remember the poem because they've had that memory hardwired 50 years ago. Let them recite it. Let them enjoy doing whatever it is that they do enjoy doing. Let them cook if they can cook safely. Maybe you need somebody to make sure that the stove's switched off or whatever, but let them do what they can do. Empower them, enable them.
Thank you, Dr. Liz and Kermi, this question is going to be directed to you. Liz, you said your dad passed away and he had dementia, Alzheimer's. Liz, okay, and then Kermi, your dad.
Sorry, I think I lost you there.
Okay, I was saying your dad. You said your dad passed away from Alzheimer's or from dementia, right? And Liz and Kermi,
Yes.
Your dad is
But
living
actually,
with dementia at the moment. The question is directed at the both of you. Does having dementia actually save a meaningful life? Don't jump at it all. Yes.
Well, I'd say yes and no. No, because as Dr. has just said, there's a neurologist who's living with dementia, and he's been writing papers. So until the point at which someone becomes incapacitated totally, then not really. Because also if it's caught early, then it can be slowed down. And that way someone is still able to have a meaningful life until the point that comes where they can't do that anymore. Thank you.
Yes, Remy. Liz?
For me, I think it's not the end of meaningful life. There's a lot more they can do. The other day we had an Alzheimer's cafe where we had a lady who was living with dementia. And when I told her, you're holding color red on your hands, and all she could remember was a song Lady in Red. So some of these things, they actually, like Dr. Ray said, their memory, it goes back to what they can remember. So work with that and enjoy every moment. Because if they are talking too much and asking you questions, it will reach a point they will no longer talk. If you're so tired of their wandering away, there'll be a point when they will no longer walk. So let's enjoy every stage. Yes, it is difficult, but it is doable. Every stage, let's enjoy it as we go along.
Okay, two things I want to bring in very quickly. Again, from Eve Minor, I think Dr. you can take this. I'll throw it to everybody. What Eve Minor said, I think it's important to highlight the importance of physiotherapy and massage with dementia/Alzheimer patients. It improves blood circulation and oxygen uptake and results in better response. So that's on the medical side, or yeah, the physiotherapy side. And I want to ask this question, which has been sent in by Nesreen Ba. Interesting question, says, how do you assist a loved one who thinks our children are his children and sometimes hits the children?
Yeah. So maybe, I mean, as far as the physical therapy and massage are concerned, I think physical therapy does have a role, especially in preventing falls. As you, I mean, in the current situation with COVID, sometimes physical visits may be actually deleterious in terms of transmission risk. But some kind of home-based physical therapy can be very helpful in certain situations. But I think the key thing is exercise. As you know, large swathes of the country don't have physical therapy, but they do have. I mean, everybody can go on a walk, do some exercise, and I think it's the exercise that is important. I would kind of emphasize that. Massage and other physical measures are very comforting, and I'm sure that if somebody likes it, that's fine. But there will be a group of people living with dementia who actually don't like being touched and don't like being showered, for example. I think even Elizabeth alluded to that. And then there are many people who would actually reject that kind of proximity to them. As far as grandparents who think that their grandchildren are their children, it is part of they've regressed in time back to the time when they were parents, and they think these small children are their kind of children. So in a way, you can kind of use some kind of validation strategies, just go with the flow, so to speak. But obviously one has to prevent abuse to the little children, and sometimes one has to intervene, and one has to try and not restrain physically, but kind of create separate areas, so to speak. And that is unfortunately, I think one thing we must never lose sight of, much as we talk about all the good that is there. I mean, living with dementia and caring for a person with dementia is also quite a messy business. It's hard. It's hard for everybody. And I think there are times when one has to make hard decisions. And that's where sometimes institutions, respite care, coming to help take the pressure off.
Okay, then I want to just, actually, Liz, Karimi, do you want to add anything to that? Okay, fine. Let me
No.
Yeah, see, go ahead, Karimi.
No, I don't have anything to add on to that. Dr. has handled it quite well.
Okay, then I'm going to ask this question. I'm going to, I suppose, it's going to boil down to this fact that a lot of people, I'm sure, are too shy to ask this question. Statistically, I'm going to ask this question. I'm going to give you the statistics first. Statistically, there are 47 million people globally living with dementia, and the cost of treating it is more than the cost of cancer, stroke, and disease put together. That's an interesting statistic. So from the perspective of Karimi and Liz, Karimi's dad is living with Alzheimer's, Liz's dad has passed away, and Dr. Hooker, from your perspective, what kind of expenses does one need to be prepared for when taking care of a person with dementia?
Okay. First, it's, as you said, it's pretty expensive. And one of the things that you realize, because well, there is early onset, but most of the time it's diagnosed later in life. So you'll find that, like insurance, someone might actually not have a medical cover. I'll give you, in our case, my dad was when he was working, he had a corporate cover. So when he retired, I went back to the insurance company and asked them if we could now transfer from corporate to private. And they said yes. However, they later called and said, no, they've reviewed the case, and because he's over 65, then they cannot cover him. I said, hang on, but he's been your client, then how don't you cover him? And they said, no, this is actually a new case. Then you might find, then we found another company actually that will cover people up to the age of 80. However, the cover does not kick in for 36 months. That's 3 years. Yeah. So you really need, you need to be ready. When the diagnosis is made, you need to be ready to face a financial challenge if someone does not have any medical. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeremy. Liz?
That's like Karemi said, it's costly because as the disease progresses, there'll be other conditions. For example, my dad had diabetes and it reached a point, like I said, he had 2 strokes. So he had to get oxygen in the house so that he can be able to breathe. So that is a cost in itself. Diapers are a cost. There's medication. There's also trying to get the balanced diet for them. There's the cost of the carer. There's the cost of respite. I tell you, it's all rounded. It's quite expensive. So yes, it is something that needs to be discussed. And I think one of the things, the only way we will end up having this conversation is when we start talking about it and ensuring that we no longer have stigma, because we self-stigmatize ourselves as carers, and so we do not talk about it, and a lot of people do not know about it. But I know sometimes it's also very foreign. It's a foreign disease. A lot of us, usually even when I was first told about dementia, I thought it was a Western world disease. So we need to start talking about it so that we can have all these issues sorted out, and it becomes a little easier for the caregiver to take care of their loved one.
Okay, Dr. I'm going to ask you to have the quick, just weigh in quickly on the aspect of the cost, and then I'm going to ask everybody to give me their parting shots. So Dr. Hooker, if you can just give us this aspect of expenses on people with dementia.
Okay, so I think one of the great things is that the minister. Sorry. So I think one of the great things is the minister.
Just very quickly, and then we can.
Sure. Yeah. One of the great things is that the Ministry of Health actually has now got a dementia desk. There's somebody who's actually a gerontologist, an elderly care trained physician who mans that office, and they're very, very interested in supporting and developing this whole area of work. And I think we need to, with Elizabeth and we need to advocate for our patients and their families. And really, the government does need to step in with a universal package of, funding support for all these people who have contributed so much over their lifetimes to this country. So it's a sad part. The sad reality is in Kenya, we need an Obamacare-like act so that everybody is covered. And everybody is covered whether they have pre-existing conditions or not, and we need and that would help with the funding type of situations. It's sadly true that even myself at the moment I'm earning, I can pay for insurance. If I reach 80 years old and I don't have the earning capacity that I have now, which I obviously probably won't, I can't afford that insurance anymore, and that's when I need it. It's just the sad reality of life. So I think we need to work all together, all stakeholders, government, and get this moving. And I think this program and your efforts in this regard are a great contribution. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Food for thought there. And sadly, we have to bring this to an end. And I was just getting warmed up. So I'm going to ask for your parting shots. I'm going to start with the last comer, the person who joined us last. I'm going to ask Karemi to give us her parting shot. Then I'll go to Dr. Hooker. Then I'll ask Liz to give us her parting shot. So Karemi, please give us your parting shot.
Okay, thank you very much actually for starting this conversation, because by talking about Alzheimer's and dementia, this is the only way that we're going to end the stigma. This is how we'll get the government on board and other stakeholders. So thank you very much. I'd also like to thank Elizabeth and the Alzheimer's and Dementia Organization of Kenya, ADOC, for all the support that they give us caregivers. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Dr.
Yeah, I would just add that, I mean, I think there is a conversation going, and it's great that you are part of this conversation. I mean, we're very grateful, and I think we all as a country need to tap into the conversation, even in these current politically charged times. Interestingly, the BBI document has a mental health section, so I think we do actually have an opportunity to increase the space for this conversation, and hopefully we will have better access to care which is supported by government and the public sector.
Okay, so don't even get me started on BBI. Your parting shot.
All right. Thank you very much. I think this was a very great conversation, a much needed conversation. Thank you, Dr. Hooker. Whenever we call on you, you always come. Thank you, Awero and Martin, for having us on your show. Thank you, Karimi, for the great job you're doing for taking care of your dad. And above all caregivers and the ones who may end up having their loved ones diagnosed with dementia, it is not the end of life. We are there to support you. We are there to walk with you. It is not an easy journey, I'll tell you that, but it is doable. But love conquers all things. If you have any questions, if you want to reach us, you can always reach us on our Facebook page. That's on our website, www.alzkenya.org. It has all our platforms there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Liz. Martin, do you have a parting? And I can't hear him. Can you hear Martin? You can't. We'll make you not come to the show anymore.
You can hear me now?
No,
You can hear me now?
Yeah.
I'm saying it was an amazing evening with you guys. I've learned a lot. I think all of us, based on the feedback from the audience, I mean, it's been a very informative show. One thing that stood out for me is take action now. You need to have a plan in place. Don't think that talking about death is taboo in such a case. It's better off to have a discussion before the patients degenerate into. Sorry, I'm being distracted. Oh gosh. Okay. You know, we have to. we don't live in a house alone.
So anybody who thought this was not live, there's evidence.
Okay, come. See the evidence. I'm being asked something. That's my little girl, Ivanka. Say hi. You're live. Hi. And let me close the show. I was just giving my parting shot and I'll be there in 2 minutes. Bye. Let me just finish. We talked about empathy versus sympathy. Stigma associated with dementia, and I want to share, of course, some quotes I had prepared. Sorry about that, but they're our children. One day I might be the one that she needs to take care of. So these moments are very important, and you'll see that in what I am sharing now. My eyes do see, my ears do hear. I'm still me, so let's be clear. My memory may fade, my walk may slow. I am me inside. Don't let me go. And the journey of dementia is a journey like no other. Dementia makes you realize that there's no time to waste. Each moment is precious, a treasure in its own way. We all know the last chapter in the book. Dementia taught me that all any of us really have is today. That's by Leanne James, and that's my parting shot in terms of quotes. Thank you all. Thank you all for joining us, for being with us this evening. I appreciate that. However the internet behaved today, I'm happy for that as well, without mentioning who our providers
Yours did,
are.
mine didn't.
It's been crazy.
Re-advertising.
Yeah. But anyway, thank you all. Thank you, and I hope to see you again on the show. I know we've got a lot to discuss. We can carry on this journey.
True.
We can walk the journey with Karemi and Clary, Liz, everyone, and keep the discussion going. Next week, for those watching us live, next week we have a new topic. We move out of the mental health awareness and we go back into other social related topics. Please join us, and remember to subscribe so that you can get a reminder when the next show has been programmed. Good night from us, live in Nairobi. See ya.
Take care. Thanks, guys.
Cheers.